Well, Ramon, we've spoken about this topic many, many times, and this is the absolute shit show that is the NHR, specifically around Discovery's support of the NHR, or to be more precise, Adrian Gore's support of the NHR. Well, it turns out he has now figured out that when you fuck around, you do find out. And he found out in the form of the Minister of Health basically saying, hey, we're not here to negotiate anymore, buddy. You should have negotiated with us before we passed the act. The act's passed now. Now you're going to have to live with what we passed. And I might not favor you, but hey, you should have thought about that before you sided with the devil, shouldn't you?
That's correct. So Adrian Gore is worried about Section 33 of the NHI, which basically says no private medical aids are required in this country. The government will pay for everything under the NHI. The problem is Section 33 has been there since the beginning of this entire process, since 2009. Arguably, Section 33 is the fundamental clause of the NHI. It is the only reason it exists, to essentially nationalize private healthcare. And if you go back in time and you read Adrian Gore's diatribes about the NHI, they say it's far away, we're negotiating, we will find the light, etc., etc., etc. Now he's coming out to say we can't afford it, so don't even try. But the ANC says, Adrian Gore, up your arse, mate. Too bad for you. We're not backing down. You can go fuck yourself. And what does Adrian say in return? We're engaging rationally with the ANC to sort out our differences. Guy's a moron of the highest degree. The highest degree.
He is a moron because the only reason he supported the NHR in the first place is because he thought, you know what, I'll support these guys because maybe I can get a slice of the pie. Maybe they'll let me manage the fund. I mean, that'll be good for Discovery, right? Now the ANC is basically saying, no, that's our pie. We want to manage that. And what's even more interesting is that everybody who's ever seen the ANC's track record at managing a pie says, well, this is going to be a disaster. And so Nicholas Crisp has now come out saying, you can't say that. You can't say it's going to be a disaster because it's not there yet. You can't say the fund is going to be corrupt because it's not there yet. So calling it corrupt now is just unfair, as if we haven't all seen the ANC when they get their grubby mitts on the pie that is any pot of money.
There's something woefully disgusting about a white communist empowering a black communist party in terms of depriving people of their healthcare in South Africa. And Nicholas Crisp is a prime example of that. Die-in-the-wool communist. He's the one that's been running NHI since the beginning, since Bill Gates handed him that white paper on NHI. And the guy just says everything's going to be fine without taking into account the ANC itself, the country, the economics of the country, the economics of the NHI itself, the funding of the NHI. None of these things are known quantities at all. Yet Nicholas Crisp comes out and says, don't judge it based on the foreseeable circumstances of every single ANC policy. You know, you can only call it corrupt once it is corrupt. The difference is, if Eskom is corrupt, we have a bit of load shedding. If healthcare is corrupt, we have no more doctors. There's a significantly different effect to the NHI being a fuck-up. But Crisp says, you can't call it that yet.
No, because as Solidarity Data has now come out and said, a lot of people think that the biggest issue of the NHR is actually that of the funding model. And Solidarity Data says that's actually not the biggest issue at all. The actual individual issue that they've highlighted is that it strips doctors of their right to choose, 1, where to practice, 2, what to practice, and 3, what specialities they actually enjoy. Because what it does is effectively does what all communist states do. It basically says that the citizen or the individual who works there, the doctor, becomes like a tool of the state. And you basically just get allocated your job according to the whims of the state. So Solidarity Data says, well, people don't generally like their freedom being taken away from them. A guy who's really interested in radiology doesn't want to be made into a GP. He certainly doesn't want to earn a GP's salary just because you told him to. And then they've basically said, well, that's going to cause people to go to other countries where they can be a radiologist because that country is probably going to want him. And Nicholas Crisp, because he's a genius IQ guy, he's like, no, that would never happen because, you know, we live in Venezuela or something where we can force people to stay here at their desks with a rope and a chain. And the guy's just freaking retarded, mate. Because people have choice. They can jump on a plane and fuck off to Australia. They don't have to put up with your shit. And this is the fundamental flaw of the NHR. When you piss off all the doctors, they don't have to stay here. They can go somewhere else.
And they really can. You can't let your workplace be dictated by a certificate from the state. If you want to be a lawyer, you go to a law firm to work. You can't be forced to become a tax lawyer. You join a law firm to decide what you would prefer. That's how the job market works. That's how capitalism works. That's how freedom works. Freedom enshrined in the Constitution. But under the NHI, a doctor will be forced to choose between being a GP and a radiologist and a cardiac surgeon, or they can just say, oh, by the way, I'm going to America or Canada or UK or Argentina, because now it's a right-wing utopia, and I'm going to be whatever the hell I want in those places, because guess what? They can. But in South Africa, you can't. But Chris says, no, it's too soon, to call all those things. For him, the shit only hits the fan when there's actually shit on the fan, not when everyone can foresee the shit hitting the fan. It's pathetic. And for Adrian Gore, he has exactly the same mindset. For years, he's been lobbying to say, NHI is great, we agree with the idea, but we need to change a few things. And the ANC, after all these years, says, up yours, Adrian Gore, go fuck yourself. And he's got no response. Typical CEO mentality when talking to commies. Don't negotiate, fight, like Solidarity does.
And we've covered that topic many, many times, especially in 2023, with the corporates who all capitulate to the government and then get really, really surprised that the government takes them from the behind, and they don't really know how it happened. Apparently, when you see your pants going down to your ankles and your underwear getting taken off, you don't really seem to notice what's going to come next. And certainly, in Adrian Gore's case, that's exactly what's happened. Now, what's more curious is that despite being rogered repeatedly, he still seems to think he can talk his way out of this. That tells me that the man, despite being a CEO, despite creating Discovery, just as retarded and does not understand the state he lives in. And Ramon, we see this time and time again with corporate South Africa. You cannot negotiate with commies. How many times do we have to say this? You cannot negotiate with commies.
But even if they weren't commies, Byron, think about this. They can't produce electricity. They can't produce a railway line. They can't produce clean water. They can't do things Britain solved in 1825. Why are you talking to these people? They're retarded. Why are you talking to them? Why are you begging them? Clap them over the head and say, listen, bitch, you need us more than we need you. You tell them what to do. You tell them what you want. You force them to do it. And then you get your way. It's amazing that you go into a room with people who are inferior to you in every single way and expect to have this one-on-one conversation in terms of what's best for all of us. It's utterly ridiculous. If someone crashes through your front door with a gun to steal from you, you don't make them a cup of tea. You shoot them in the head. Discovery could have done that metaphorically years ago, but they choose not to.
And amazingly, the Deputy Minister of Health says that exact thing. He actually says, we have negotiated with you on this topic for over 10 years. You've had ample opportunity to tell us what you don't like, and you never said anything. So why are you moaning now, bitches? That's literally what he says. And he's right. Because these guys, the only reason they supported it, they thought, haha, we can get it on the mullah. Yeah, it didn't work out so well for you. Now, Ramon, here's a problem. And this is another article that actually raised a very important question, which is where are we going to get our doctors from? Because you see, in the NHS and in many other nationalized health services around the world, they cannot afford the health services they have. They can't afford doctors. So you know what they do? They import the doctors from the third world and they pay them a substandard wage in their currency. And they go, we solved the budget issues. We got cheap doctors from Zimbabwe. Mate, we are the third world. Where are we going to get our doctors from? Like there is no more third world than us. We are literally at the bottom of the pile. So where are we getting our cheap-ass doctors from? Even Zim doctors won't come here.
No, well, I think you should ask Adrian Gore, really. Ask him where you can find doctors. So there are patients who use Discovery to pay for those particular doctors. It's not my fault. It's not my problem. It's his problem to solve. But At the end of the day, Byron, as you always say, the problem is not the ANC. The problem is a distinct lack of strategy from the opposition. And this is a clear example of that. ANC will always be communists. Communists will always be communists. The fact that no one else wants to call them out on it and no one else wants to fight them on their communism is exactly why we get the NHI in the first place. In this particular regard, corporate South Africa is the failed opposition to the NHI. And it's basically their fault this has happened.
Adrian, you deserve everything the NHI is going to throw at you because you are complicit in this. We're going to say it again. You are complicit because you still think you can negotiate with communists. Do you remember the old phrase? We do not negotiate with terrorists. It's time you learn that phrase, my friend.